I also would like to welcome you all. It's a joy to be with you. I'll read from Whispers from Eternity. Demand to set fire to the forest of darkness. I built a fire of devotion in the dark forest of delusion. Alas, the fire only smoldered. Then thou didst come and set fire to a few of my frailties. That fire quickly spread on, consuming the bushes of my prickly desires, my tall, towering vanities, and the thick underbrush of my arrogance. The whole forest of my darkness is blazing, and I behold only thy light shining everywhere. I thank thee, Father, for thy help. Help me thus always. Let me open a path of light for all to follow. So, this is a very timely topic of darkness and light, I think, these days, as we find ourselves, at Ananda. When I first arrived here, Benai was on the porch of the market doing food storage because we were preparing for hard times. That was over 50 years ago. So just so you know, I think we've arrived. I think those times are upon us, and it's a great battle between darkness and light in a way. The light is the reality, and the darkness seems real but isn't. And so we just have to put out a lot of energy to remain in the light and to keep the darkness at bay. It's manifesting in a lot of different ways, and I'll just tell you something that I found somewhat humorous and yet, poignant also. A man who has lived in this country from India, he immigrated as a young man, was married, had a family, is a doctor, and after all these decades, this is current now, after all these decades, he has worked on building a temple in his area, which he lives in Texas. And then I believe I'm getting this right, his final gift to the temple was a 20-foot tall statue of Hanuman. So a monkey god. We're talking Texas. Now, we lived in Texas, so it's like, okay. And then he was, and it's both funny and yet poignant too. He was very hurt that some of the local Christians started demonstrating outside of the temple because they looked at this and thought, my God, what does this have to do with Christianity? And it's 20 feet tall. And I just thought, wow, I get both sides, I mean, the Christians, they have a point, they have their beliefs, fundamental Christian, whatever. And so does this man too. And it's just that he's living in a time when I'd say the timing isn't quite right yet. Maybe in 50 years, this will, especially in that area of the country, 50 years, it will resolve and people will understand. And he said, for me, Hanuman, it represents courage. And so he was baffled by why this negative energy would be coming toward him. And anyway, but I just thought, wow, what a time that we're in. And what a thing that we have to do what works. It's the thing that I really appreciate about this path. Master Paramhansa Yogananda, who I never knew in person, but got through Swami Kriyananda and working to build Ananda. And if you don't do what works, nothing happens. And so, you have your spiritual life, but you also have the reality of what common sense tells you how to go about it, how to work on that. And seeing that situation in Texas, I felt extremely grateful that Master came, Paramhansa Yogananda as Master, came, and what did he bring in 1920? He brought self-realization, because you use that term and you don't hit people with a god who is represented by a monkey, and we all know that's wonderful. Hanuman is about courage, about devotion, all of that, but he brought self-realization. And I loved it that this reading from Whispers about banishing the darkness starts with us. And the God comes and burns up our frailties, burns up our arrogance, just lets the fire burn so that we can live in the light. And anyway, I just found that interesting, but also to really deeply appreciate that in our time, self-realization, that term, is much more broadly acceptable by people. They're not having to translate something that they don't understand from another country about God. And, we look at all the different gods and goddesses from India, and on our path, if that's new to you, but once you meditate, practice Kriya Yoga, and you feel the underlying unity and extreme broadness of God, that God is in everything and is everywhere, like the light. It is the light. God is the light. That you realize, oh, well, all of these expressions in India, aren't they delightful? They're all the different ways that God is worshipped. And as Swami said, they're not idols, they're ideals. And I just thought, wow, what a time we're in being able to relate to people where they're at. And I think that's very important. We need to, we had a minister's retreat yesterday, which was very nice. And Jyotish and Devi were speaking and talking about we need to all, and not just ministers, everybody, be channels for light and be that consciously and dynamically, but we also have to apply that light in the way that it works in the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And so, we don't want to come up to someone and hit them with a light, and a version of that, and a way to talk about that they're going, what? Huh? I don't like that, because they don't understand it. And so just for all of us to, yes, we need to be channels of light, and we need to really work with that light in the way that it will help the people that are in front of us. In thinking about this, I was remembering that we, with Ananda, we've been through quite a lot over 50 years. A lot of different things happen. Community burns down, and then we have a lawsuit, and all kinds of stuff happen. Then we have to rebuild the community. In the part where we were trying to rebuild after everything burned down, 50 years ago, by the way, 1976, 2026, and we were running into, with the county, real problems, because we'd submit a new master plan. They wanted master plan. So we'd submit a new master plan, and they'd say, well, no, you need to do this. And so we'd do that. And then we'd do it again. And then they'd just keep putting us off. I think they hoped we'd go away somehow. Anyway, but at a certain point, one of Swami's ideas, because being practical, was, well, maybe we just need to incorporate as a city. That might be a solution. Then we could have our own planning department and all of that. And so that was in about 1980, I think, something like that. Anyway, we went through a fair amount, and we would have hearings in town with our neighbors from the Ridge, who were always a little suspicious of Ananda to begin with, because we were a group of people. We lived a little differently from everybody else out here. And now we wanted to become a city, and that was like, no, a big no. And so they would come, we would have hearings in town, and they would come and we would be there. And they were very negative. They were very challenging to us and outright negative. And so at a certain point, we had a couple of these meetings, and at a certain point, someone said to Swami, what should we do? How should we deal with people who come up to us and just start unloading, negativity? And he said, oh, yes, he said, it's simple. And I'll tell you, it's simple, but not easy to do. But he said, first of all, you want to get centered in your heart immediately. So let's say you're with somebody. You just want to get centered in your heart, calm the heart's feelings as much as possible, and send out a strong ray of light. And I'm making movements, but nothing would happen then. Send out a strong ray of light to that other person that's confronting you. And he said, interestingly, several things happen. One, that ray of light, we're being proactive. That ray of light protects us. It's like a shield, and it goes out to that other person, and it's an offering of light. And so if there's any receptivity in that other person, then they may soften. And if there isn't, they'll just block it. No receptivity. But what happens when they block it is that we're sending out light. That's a protection. But when they block it, that energy has to go somewhere. It doesn't come to us. It goes back to them, to the source. And so it's just something I would say, keep it in mind. It's something you would need to practice doing, but it may be something that you want to just keep in mind. It helps even to think about sending light from your heart to someone that's negative in front of you, because it offers them an opportunity. Who knows what happens? But that idea is and I think it may come in handy in this year, next year, the coming years, who knows? But just so that we're dynamic in what we're doing. Yes, we're channels of light, but let's make that a little more conscious. And when Swami said that, I thought, wow, yes, not easy to do by any means, because you get hooked in the heart by negative emotions. And I'll share with you something that happened for me more recently with that. So as we know, some pretty negative things have been happening in the country over the last several weeks. I'm not going to get into specifics. You all know about them generally. And as Davy said yesterday at our ministers' meeting, it's good to be aware, and it is good to be aware of what's going on in the country, but not to get involved. So it can be a fine line. And so I found myself having a particular interest in this one incident, and I could tell I was getting too interested. In other words, I was knowing too much about what happened. And I could feel anger in my heart, like a little hook, just went in there and was like, and for me, it wasn't about the specifics of what happened to people. It was about the reaction to it and the lying. And I thought, ooh, I don't, heart likes and dislikes, I don't like that. And so there it was. And I thought, oh, whoa, stop. And so my reaction to that was just to pull back. And I thought, no, I can't even begin to go in that direction, because if you do that, you can't be a channel of light. You're just sharing emotions. And you also lower yourself to that same level of where that's coming from. And just so you know, energy and magnetism are very direct. And so we want to be very careful about how we do things these days. There's a lot of cross currents, good and bad, dark and light, all of it. And I think it will continue. And so just to be aware of the energy, and particularly in the heart. The other thing I was thinking about, and it's a question that I had actually when I very first came here. I had two things that were in my mind. Karma, I don't know why. Why did I have those? I wanted to know what it looked like for wisdom and love to be expressed in a person. I didn't understand how they could be together. And when I came, and as I met Swami and saw him in action with people and all of that, I thought, there it is. Yeah, his energy expressed both wisdom and love. I could feel it. So that was one question answered. But the other one was, how do good people act, continue acting good in a time of darkness? And I don't know, again, for me it was particular. I looked to World War II and all the weird, horrible things that had happened. And I just thought, I need to know what do people do who are good? What happens for them? And at that moment in time, Padma McGilloway was here then too, so this is like 1975 or so. And the book, The Hiding Place, had just come out. Well, it had just come out that we knew about. It had actually been printed, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before. But it came out, and someone recommended it. I don't remember how I found out about it. But when I found out about it, I thought, oh, wow. So I looked at the book. First part was about her life. I just went to the second part because I wanted to know what they did. How did they react? Because they being the 10 Booms, who were devout Christians, and not just devout Christians, they lived the teachings of Jesus. They lived that way. And they were watchmakers in Haarlem, in Holland. And the father had Jewish friends who were watchmakers, and then the sisters, Betsy and Corrie, they helped out, and they were watchmakers in the little shop there. And so, but they also, when Holland got in one day run over by Germany, taken over by the Nazis, not just the Germans, but the Nazis, then everything was taken over. And the atrocities that started to happen were pretty bad, horrible in fact. And so they could see that the Jews were being targeted. And so they built a little secret room in their house. And it's called The Hiding. That's why the book is called The Hiding Place, because they built this room, had it built, and they hid Jews there. And they could get shot for doing that. They could, get arrested, all of that. And what happened with this family was that the one, Corrie, who wrote the book, had the book written, she went to her brother, who was a Lutheran minister, and said, so how do I go about doing this, and can you help me? And he looked at her and he said, and she said, this is a Lutheran minister speaking. He said, you need to develop your own sources. And so about how to go about this. And so she did. And so they did this for not probably too long, but during the war they hid a number of Jews and they lived with them. And they had a whole system of how they could get to the hiding place room and all of that. And somebody betrayed them, at a certain point, and they were arrested. And this is an 80-year-old father, and then the one sister was in her 50s, and Corrie was in her mid-40s. And they were arrested, and as they were being arrested, they were betrayed. Someone said, oh, they're hiding Jews. They couldn't find the room in the house. They couldn't find it. It was so well built. And there was 7 people in there. Anyway, but they arrested them anyway, took them away. And as they were doing that, one of the German soldiers said to the father, who was old, he said, "Oh, old man, if you want to you can die in your bed. We won't take you away because you're too old." And the father looked at him and he said, "I will continue to help anybody who comes to my door asking for it." And so they took him too, And so the father died pretty quickly after that in custody. And then the two sisters were in concentration camps, and they were in the worst. It was just horrible. And so, but the one, Betsy, she understood about the teachings of Christ. And it was really quite amazing because at one point they were both watching this horrible scene happen where somebody was being killed or something in the concentration camp. And Corrie said, "Betsy, this is just awful, these poor people." And Betsy said, "Yes, we need to pray for them." And she said, "I realized she was talking about the guards." And that was her attitude the whole time, was looking for the light and looking for a way to pray for these poor people who were living in such incredible darkness. And so at a certain point, one of the things that she said was, "Jesus, keep me in the center of your will. Help me to not go mad by poking about outside of that." Because so much was going on. And again, I just offer this because, who knows what we'll have to look. Right now it gets brought into our living room, "Oh, you turn on the news, whoa, look at that." Everything, more than I ever wanted to know about what happened, but there it is. And so how do we deal with that? You just go to the center. You go to Master's will. You go to the will of Christ. You go to your own center and you say, "Keep me in your will." And that, I think, was very, very important. The other thing that I wanted to, I brought my book, so it's 50 years old. But I wanted to read this one part, and I'll close with this, because this is a story that I've told it, and other people have told it over the years from this book. But I'd like to read how actually it's stated here, and you'll get it right away. So this is taking place, World War II is finished, things are coming back to normal. Corrie ten Boom, who was the one survivor in her family that was arrested, she's helping people, all of that. And she goes into Germany. She goes to churches because her sister, before dying, said, "Corrie, you need to tell people that the love of Christ, the love of Jesus is deeper than any well of darkness. That love is still deeper, and you need to go and tell them about our experiences here in the camp." And so she did, finally. She realized she had to do that. But this happened for her, and it was a real turning point for her. "It was at a church service in Munich that I saw him, the former SS man who had stood guard at the shower room door in the processing center at Ravensbrück." Ravensbrück was one of the worst concentration camps. "He was the first of our actual jailers that I had seen in that time. And suddenly it was all there, the room full of mocking men, the heaps of clothing, Betsy's pain-blanched face. He came up to me as the church was emptying, beaming and bowing. 'How grateful I am for your message, Fraulein,' he said. 'To think that, as you say, he has washed my sins away.' His hand was thrust out to shake mine, and I, who had preached so often to people the need to forgive, kept my hand at my side. Even as I tried to smile, I struggled to raise my hand, I could not. I felt nothing, not the slightest spark of warmth or charity. And so again, I breathed a silent prayer. Jesus, I cannot forgive him. Give me your forgiveness. As I took his hand, the most incredible thing happened. From my shoulder, along my arm, and through my hand, a current seemed to pass from me to him, while into my heart sprang a love for this stranger that almost overwhelmed me. So, you know, when we're looking at scenes, The Imitation of Christ, the book, The Life of Master, how he related to all the things he went through in his own life, persecutions, having to watch World War II, all of that. It's a different mindset about how we look at light and darkness. And so I was thinking, when I remembered the incident that kind of hooked me, I thought, you know, the woman who died is free. Yes, there's stuff left, I know. But the man who did the deed, he's got heavy darkness to carry with him. So I just offer that out because we're in a time like that. Who knows when we will come up into situations that are volatile, that, I mean, people walking down the street in cities can, you know, who knows what happens the next minute. So anyway, just keep these things in mind. Remember your heart and that idea of sending light to the other person's heart, no matter how dark, angry, whatever they are. Just experiment, try it. But know that, as she says here, I couldn't forgive that person, but Jesus could. And when she asked for him to do it through her, then it happened, and it happened in a very dramatic way. So again, I offer that to all of you. We want to live in the light, we want to act as channels of light, and these are ways to think about doing, actually making it real, common sense applications. Joy to you.
Sings everywhere. The flowers are all laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air. The flowers are all laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air. Leave home in the sunshine, dance through a meadow, or sit by a stream and just be. The lilt of the water will gather your worries and carry them down to the sea. The lilt of the water will gather your worries and carry them down to the sea. Men hunger for freedom but don't see the dungeon. It's only the thought that they're bound. Desires are their shackles, the hope that tomorrow the doorway to joy will be found. Desires are their shackles, the hope that tomorrow the doorway to joy will be found. There's joy all around us. Why wait till tomorrow? We've only this moment to live. A heaven within us is ours for the finding, a freedom no riches can give. A heaven within us is ours for the finding, a freedom no riches can give. There's joy in the heavens, a smile on the mountains, and melody sings everywhere. The flowers are all laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air. The flowers are all laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air. The flowers are all laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air.
Beautiful.
Thank you to all of our donors for making it possible to share these videos and keep this channel ad-free. If you feel inspired to donate, visit ananda.org/give.